The number is phone 1300 222 891, text 0467 922 891. Get voting for today's lunchtime legend. And look, thank you very much to the texter who sent through that it was on this day in 1945 that an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, killing 80,000 people. Dreadful, dreadful day, and I know certainly remembered by the peace movement on this day, so thanks for letting me know that. Well, we are talking about calling out racist behaviour in real life. Is it something that takes a lot of courage? It's something that you've done, and you've got a story to share with us. I'd love to hear your particular perspectives and your experiences. I'll give you the phone numbers again. Please pop them in your phone if you haven't done it. 1300 222 891 to phone, to text 0467 922 891. It's 14 past 1.
This is Afternoons with Deb Tribe on ABC Radio Adelaide.
Well, as I said, I think the biggest news of the day today is the outcome of the investigation into a racial slur by Tex Walker to Robbie Young. Now, we don't know the details of that, but it's irrelevant. It's been admitted to be a racist remark. And the issue really only came to light because the comment was heard by an unnamed Adelaide Football Club official who was brave enough to then report it. And I say brave enough because when you've got a star player, it takes a lot of courage to call them out on something like this. So I'd love to know your views if you've done anything like this, but I also want to explore the ethics of it as well with Dr. Matt Beard, who's from the Kunlana, I'm going to get this wrong, Centre for Ethical Leadership. Hi Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hello, how are you? It's the Kunlana Centre.
Kunlana, sorry, I've got terrible pronunciation. Well look, tell us Matt, is it something that you really need to approach very carefully? Because look, I've got nothing but respect for anybody that tries to call out racist comments, but I know just from my own personal life, it can cause a lot of problems, and that's in your personal life. What happens when you move it into your professional life or even your family life? What are the ethics of calling out racist comments?
Look, I think that one of the challenges that arises in these situations is that we have a really, really deeply ingrained kind of social attitude that dobbing is bad, that it's something that is done by spineless people who don't have the strength of character to deal with issues on their own, and need to bring in some kind of, powerful figure to do it for them. So whether that's parents or whether that's authorities or teachers, a lot of us, we tell our kids, don't be a dobber, nobody likes a dobber. And then when we witness these actual occasions where calling out does seem to not only demonstrate some personal courage, but also where it seems to serve a really important purpose, suddenly all of our kind of default beliefs and stuff get thrown up in arms. And my instinct is to say that's probably because we haven't thought particularly carefully about those messages that we're sending to our kids in the first place. The reason this seems complicated is because we think that we have this default setting that dobbing is bad, which actually is probably the thing we really need to investigate closely.
No, I'd never really thought about it that way. You're quite right. Dibba dobber, you called it straight up from, primary school. If you ever, would think about calling someone out, I remember at school you'd always take the rap for things that you didn't do rather than call out the person that did it, because that was seen as a more honourable way to be. I never really thought how entrenched that was. But, racism, is that also an entrenched behaviour in Australian culture?
Well, yeah, unquestionably it is. And there are people who will want to push back on that. The reality is when we see in terms of outcomes and the experiences of people of colour in this country, they do not enjoy the same outcomes. They do not have the same experience of inclusion as people who are white. And that is one of the realities of living in Australia, and it's one of the things that we all have a responsibility to face up to, especially those of us who are not affected by racism. So I do think that it's a reality. I think think that when we're dealing with, the idea of calling someone out as racist, one of the complications is that we are in this mindset that racist is racist intention, that the racist person is someone who genuinely thinks negative thoughts about people of colour. The casual remarks that often have comments to things that are not politically correct, don't count as racism, and then it's actually unjust or unfair or disproportionate to call someone racist on the basis of comments like those. And so we put this really heavy weight, on kind of like that it's a very serious thing to accuse someone of racism. And yet a lot of us kind of accept that racism is pretty virulent in our society. So the two things can't be true, that there are no racist people and yet there's lots and lots of racism. And so I think we need to normalise this a little bit, and I think the other thing that is going on in this conversation is that it's about power as well. We're dealing with a very, very influential person within a club, a very influential person within society. It's not the case that a casual kind of call out of like, hey, that's not okay, is going to have much of an impact. And it's when we're dealing with power, whether that's social power or formal power, that we do need, accountability mechanisms. We do actually need to report things because there is no other way to hold people to account.
Look, I'm interested in Tim, who sent a text through on 0467922891. Not so much in the context of racism, but in all other ways that we can discriminate. Vernacular changes a lot. I know words that used to be acceptable, for example, in the disability sector, are no longer acceptable, and they've become taken on a discriminatory tone. You can say the same in relation to gender, sexual orientation. Language changes over time, and Tim says on the text line, let the person who's never discriminated in any way or form in their life put their hand up and cast the first stone. We've become so very precious, and crucifixion is so popular. So I guess he's coming from the other angle, is it the pot calling the kettle black? But we've got to start somewhere, don't we, in terms of calling it out?
Well, yeah, it wasn't the pot calling the kettle black, it was the prominent ASL player. But the issue here is that it's not... The reason, the person who reported this has chosen to remain anonymous. They have not done this as an act of moral grandstanding. I think it's true that sometimes we call things out as an act of moral grandstanding, as a way of positioning ourselves as being morally superior. However, the idea that we should...
And they've chosen to remain anonymous because they would be absolutely vilified.
Oh, yeah.
The responsibility for calling out these problems on the person who's...
They probably have to move overseas and find out who it is.
Except that, there are lots of us who have been discriminatory in different ways, especially those of us who don't come from a diverse background. Like myself, I'm a white straight guy, and there are certainly times when I was playing rugby, going through in my teens and early 20s where I used homophobic and racial slurs, and that was part of the culture. I don't feel that way now. I don't think it was okay for me to use those terms at the time. But nor do I think that because I have done that I must never call something out unless I be a hypocrite. Because if I don't, then it's left to the person who is copying those slurs to call it out. And it actually falls to all of us to come around as a community around those people and say, not just it's not okay that you be called that thing, and I'm not one of the horrible people who calls you that thing, but I care about you. You're part of my community, and I'm here to stand beside you in your identity and recognize that if someone is trying to make you feel like you do not belong, then I am here to show you that you do. Okay. And I am here to show you that it's that behavior that doesn't belong.